My name is Brian. I grew up in a home where people did not yell, did not teach formulas for success, and did not talk much about status. But from an early age, I was taught something else. Respect is not something you ask for. It is something you leave behind you, like a trace. In my family, people valued not loud words, but the way a person carried himself when no one was watching. Not how much money he had, but how much dignity he had inside. And maybe that is exactly why I still cannot spokojno watch smart, kind, hard-working people spend years feeling invisible, as if their voice means nothing, as if their presence dissolves into the air. If you have ever caught yourself thinking, "Why does no one really listen to me?" then you are not here by accident. Because today I want to tell you something I did not learn from books. I learned it from life. Respect is not lost all at once. It leaves a little at a time, drop by drop, moment by moment. Usually before you even notice it happening. Respect is not a reaction to your status, your appearance, or your name. It is a quiet recognition that the person standing in front of me is someone I can rely on. You cannot demand it. You cannot buy it. You cannot perform it. You can only earn it, and not once, over and over again. I have seen people with degrees, expensive watches, polished clothes, and impressive titles turn into empty space the moment they opened their mouths because there was no real weight behind what they said. And I have seen the opposite. I have met people with no connections, no grand achievements, no fancy image at all, and yet the moment they walked into a room, everybody instinctively lowered their voice, not because they were afraid, but because they felt it. This person knows his worth. Respect is not applause, it is trust. It is the willingness to listen, even when you disagree, and it only lives where your actions match your words. No exceptions, no excuses, no inner voice saying, "Well, this one does not really matter," because it all matters. Every choice you make, even the smallest one, is either building your authority or quietly tearing it down. Today, I want to walk you through 7 rules, the 7 things that quietly decide whether people will respect you or not. But the most important one is not at the beginning, and not in the middle. The one everything else stands on, like a house on its foundation, I will leave for the very end. Only the people who stay until the last minute will hear it. Because it is not just another useful idea. Without it, all the other rules lose power, like an engine without fuel. Rule number 1. Respect begins the moment you stop being convenient for everyone else and start being honest with yourself. A lot of people confuse kindness with softness, and they confuse being accommodating with being wise. But the truth is, the need to please everyone is rarely about caring for other people. Most of the time, it is fear. Fear of conflict, fear of judgment, fear of being left alone, and that fear, even when it hides behind a smile and phrases like, "Sure, whatever works, no problem," slowly erases you as a person. People stop seeing you as someone solid. They start seeing you as background, the one who will always agree, always adapt, always give way, always take a step back. But people do not respect the person who avoids all friction at any cost. They respect the person who has an inner line that even close people do not casually cross. If you cannot say no, that does not make you good. It makes you useful. And people will use you, not always because they are cruel, but because you taught them they could. And over time, even the people who truly love you begin to treat you like someone without weight. You can spend years helping, giving, sacrificing your time, your energy, your attention, but if you cannot protect what is yours, people stop taking you seriously. Not out of malice, not even consciously. That is just how people work. We respect those who know how to respect themselves. I did not understand that right away. When I was younger, I was afraid to say no too. I was afraid people would think I was rude, selfish, difficult, wrong. Until one day I remembered my grandfather. He grew up in a hard time. He worked as a mechanic. He lived simply, without any drama or show. But in our family, everyone, even the oldest people in the room, became quieter when he walked in. Not because he shouted, because every word he spoke had weight. One day I asked him, "Grandpa, why does everyone listen to you? You never push anyone." He looked at me, stayed quiet for a moment, and then said, "Son, I do not try to be good for everyone. I try to be honest with myself and with other people, and honesty does not ask for permission. It just stands where it belongs." Then he told me a story. Once, someone asked him to sign a document that was not clean. They promised him money. They promised peace. They promised an easier life. He refused, not loudly, not dramatically. He just said, "I cannot do that." And you know what is most interesting? He was not fired. He was not destroyed. No one cast him out. Quite the opposite. After that, people began to respect him even more. Because in a world where so many people bend with the first strong gust of wind, the person who knows how to stand upright becomes a landmark. And that is when I understood something important. Saying no is not rejecting someone else. It is confirming yourself. It is saying, "I am here. I am whole. I do not dissolve for your comfort." And the moment you stop being convenient and start being real, people begin to see you differently, not because you became harsher, but because you became more reliable. Rule number 2. Respect does not come to the person who is afraid to have an opinion. A lot of people think the safest thing is to stay quiet. Do not say anything too clearly. Do not take a real position. Do not stand out. It feels safer that way. No one will judge you. No one will call you strange. No one will drag you into conflict. But that kind of caution has a price. And with time, it becomes a very expensive one. That is how people end up living for years in a kind of inner fog. Today they support one point of view. Tomorrow they support the opposite one, depending on who they are around. In one group, they nod along. In another group, they criticize the exact thing they agreed with yesterday. And the problem is not that they truly change their mind. The problem is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, fear of being inconvenient, fear of hearing, and who are you to think that? And little by little, inside that fear, a person loses more than his voice. He loses himself, because having no position is not neutrality. It is self-erasure. It is like saying to the world, "My opinion matters so little, I am willing to trade it for someone else's just to be left alone." And the world accepts that offer very quickly. People stop asking what you really think, because they already know. You are going to say whatever is easiest for them to hear. You stop being a source. You become an echo. And people do not respect an echo. They respect the one whose voice is actually his own. You see this in ordinary life all the time. At work, you stay silent in meetings even when you can clearly see the mistake because you are afraid of sounding stupid. In your relationship, you agree with your partner while something inside you resists, just to avoid tension. In public, you repeat other people's phrases, opinions, and slogans, without even asking yourself, "Do I actually believe this?" And over time, you stop being able to tell where other people's thoughts end and yours begin. You dissolve into the collective mood like a drop of water in the ocean. Yes, people do not criticize you, but they do not respect you either, because respect is not born from endless agreement. It is born from clarity. A person without a position is like a ship without a rudder. He can be pushed in any direction. You cannot lean on him in a hard moment. You cannot trust him with direction. Respect appears when people feel this. He may not stand with me, but he will not betray himself. He may be wrong. He may see things differently. He may disagree, but he has a center. And even when you argue with him, you still feel respect, because you are not standing in front of an empty shell that shifts with every wind. You are standing in front of someone who has an axis. I saw this in a man from our neighborhood. His name was Michael. He was about 15 years older than I was, an engineer, calm, collected. Never dramatic, never loud, never trying to look heroic. And then one day, the company where he worked started pushing older employees out under the language of restructuring. On paper, everything looked clean. In reality, people were being pressured into signing voluntary resignation paperwork so the company could avoid real responsibility. A lot of people signed, some out of fear, some out of exhaustion, some because they had spent their whole lives learning not to challenge the system. Michael did not. He did not raise his voice. He did not slam doors. He did not stage a rebellion. He simply said, "I do not agree. I have worked honestly here for years. If you want to let me go, do it legally, but I am not signing a paper that lies in my name." At first, people looked at him sideways. Some whispered behind his back. Some thought, "Why is he making this harder? Why is he asking for trouble?" But not long after that, people started coming to him, not in groups, one by one, quietly, and they asked, "So what should we do?" Because inside his calm, they heard strength. Not aggression, not ego, strength. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply refusing to abandon himself at the exact moment when everyone else was doing it for the sake of convenience. In the end, the company had to adjust the terms. Not perfectly, not for everyone, but enough that many people got a fairer outcome. And later, Michael was invited into another company, not just as a strong specialist, but as someone people could trust with other people, as a mentor, as a steady hand. Why? Because they understood something simple. A person who does not lose himself under pressure is more than a professional. He is rare, and that is the paradox. The more afraid you are to say what you really think, the less real respect you will have in your life. Because people are not drawn to those who are always just going along. They are drawn to those who know what they stand on, even when they disagree with them, because honesty commands respect. Honesty with yourself, honesty with others, honesty with reality. Having no position is not protection. It is a slow disappearance. You think you are preserving peace around you, but what you are really doing is destroying trust in yourself step by step. And the moment you stop believing your own view has value, the world stops believing it too. But the answer is not to argue with everyone. It is not to become sharp, combative, or performatively tough. The answer is much simpler. Ask yourself every day, what do I actually think about this? And do not run from the answer, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it does not match the majority, even if it costs you something inside. Because respect does not come to the people who only say what is expected of them. It comes to the people who say what they believe is true, calmly, clearly, without drama, without performance, but with dignity. Rule number 3. Respect leaves the people who cannot accept someone else's success. Envy is not just an unpleasant emotion, it is a trap for the mind, and it rarely arrives under its real name. More often, it disguises itself as fairness, as just being realistic, as some cold, clever comment like, "So what exactly did he do to deserve that promotion?" And in that moment, it feels like you are just seeing clearly, like you are just calling things what they are. But what you are really doing is feeding an inner enemy, the one whispering, "You are no worse than he is. You deserve more. He does not." And over time, that whisper becomes a habit. You stop noticing other people's path. You start noticing their weaknesses. You magnify their mistakes. You minimize their wins. You quietly shrink their effort, even while smiling and saying, "Happy for you." The problem is not that you ever feel envy. That part is human. The problem begins when you let that feeling govern your language, your perception, and your relationship to the world. Because constant criticism of other people's success, even when it sounds intelligent and partly justified, builds an invisible wall around you. People stop sharing good news with you because they know your good for him is probably followed by a but. They stop inviting you into new things because they can feel it. You are not standing there as an ally. You are standing there as a judge, and judges do not inspire people. They push them away. But even that is not the worst part. The worst part is what envy does to you inside. It does not make you stronger. It does not bring you closer to your goals. It does not move you forward. It chains you to someone else's life. You stop seeing your own possibilities because all your attention is now focused on what someone else already has. You are no longer living in creation. You are living in comparison, and in that state, it is impossible to grow, impossible to command respect, because respect grows out of inner fullness, not out of a constant sense of lack. You see it in ordinary things. You scroll through social media and instead of feeling inspired, you feel irritated. A coworker gets promoted, and instead of asking what you could learn from him, you start looking for the hidden reason he got lucky. A friend succeeds, and instead of being glad for him, you immediately start noticing where he got carried away, where he overestimated himself, where he just happened to catch the right moment. And over time, you become hard to be happy around. Not because you are openly cruel, but because your energy is always moving downward, not toward, maybe I can build something too, but toward, why him and not me? I saw this in a man named Ethan. He was smart, educated, worked in tech, made good money, knew how to speak well, and gave the impression of being disciplined and strong. But then his childhood friend Daniel started a small electronics repair business. Nothing flashy, no hype, no big headlines, just a small business that started growing steadily. Then he hired a few people. Then he rented a real office. It was all moving slowly, but solidly. At first, Ethan congratulated him, and it even sounded sincere. But a few weeks later, little comments started slipping out. Well, sure, it is easier for him. He does not obsess over quality that much. Or, if I wanted to, I could build something 10 times bigger. At first, Daniel ignored it, but after a while, he started noticing a pattern. Every time he shared something good, Ethan found a way to make it smaller. Even when Daniel opened a second location, Ethan said something like, well, the main thing now is not going bankrupt like most businesses like that. And technically, that is not an insult. It is not a scandal. It is not an attack. But those kinds of words always carry the same hidden message. I cannot watch your growth in peace. A year passed. Daniel stopped telling him how business was going. Then he stopped calling just to talk. And when Ethan later started struggling at work, he was genuinely surprised Daniel did not step in to help. We are friends, he said. But friendship is not only about being there in hard times, it is also about being able to handle someone else's growth without poisoning the air between you. Because trust cannot survive where the hidden message is always, you did not really deserve that. And the saddest part was that Ethan honestly thought of himself as realistic, not envious. He did not understand that his criticism was not analysis. It was a projection of his own fear. He was afraid to try something of his own, afraid to take a risk, afraid to fail, and instead of building himself, he started wearing down someone else's success, as if making another man smaller would somehow make him bigger. But the world does not work that way. When you reduce other people, you do not rise. You just sink into shadow. Daniel kept growing, and over time different people gathered around him, the kind who knew how to be genuinely happy for someone else's progress. Not because their own lives were perfect, but because they understood something simple. Another person's success is not a threat. It is proof that something is possible. And those people later became his partners, his allies, his mentors, his lifelong friends. That is the point. The moment you stop measuring your worth against somebody else's achievements, you free up a huge amount of energy. Energy to build, energy to grow, energy to move, energy to respect yourself and other people, because real respect cannot live side by side with envy. It needs a space where someone else's win is not felt as your loss, where another person's success does not make you shrink, where it reminds you how wide the world really is. There is room in it for more than one person. So stop spending your strength on what belongs to someone else. Start building what is meant to exist in your own life. And the moment you stop staring into other people's windows and start tending your own house, people will begin to respect you not just for what you achieved, but for who you became on the way there. Rule number 4. Respect does not stay where people feel drained after talking to you. We usually think respect is built through words, actions, status, or the way a person carries himself. But there is another layer, a quieter one, harder to notice, and yet deeply felt. It is the state a person brings into the room. There are people who make it easier to breathe. After even a short conversation with them, you feel clearer, calmer, more grounded, not because they said anything magical, but because there is no extra chaos in them, no inner shaking, no compulsion to pour anxiety into every interaction. And then there are others. They may not say anything obviously wrong. They may even sound supportive, caring, and attentive. But when the conversation ends, you feel heavy, tight inside, tired, as if your strength quietly leaked out while you were speaking. People do not always confront that kind of person. They do not always criticize them. More often, something else happens. They just stop calling first, stop inviting them unless necessary, stop sharing anything personal, because at the level of feeling it becomes clear, this connection does not restore me. It exhausts me. And that does not always mean the person is bad. Very often it is not about badness at all. It is about someone who never learned how to hold his own inner state. Someone living in chronic tension, anxiety, and inner lack, bringing that same tension into every contact. You can be kind, generous, helpful, sincere, but if inside you there is a constant sense that the world is unstable, people are dangerous, and everything could collapse at any moment, other people will feel that more strongly than they hear your words, not through your phrases, through your tone, through your pauses, through your eyes, through the atmosphere of your presence. And the hardest part is that many people do not notice this in themselves. They are genuinely confused. Why do people avoid me? I am always willing to listen. I try to be there. I am not doing anything wrong. But being willing to listen is not the same thing as being able to support. Sometimes a person listens not to help someone else regain strength, but to sink once more into a familiar emotional drama, to relive anxiety, to feel needed through someone else's pain. And then every conversation becomes a funnel. Someone comes to you hoping to find support and leaves heavier than when they arrived, because instead of stability, they meet amplified anxiety. Instead of grounded presence, they meet emotional turbulence. This is especially destructive in close relationships. A partner, friend, or coworker may not even understand consciously what feels wrong. Everything seems polite. Everything seems normal. The person seems to care, but the body remembers more accurately than the mind. After the conversation, there is fatigue, irritation, a desire to close off, a feeling that life suddenly became heavier. Respect does not grow in that kind of soil. It needs another space, a space where being near someone does not make you contract, but helps you gather yourself. where you do not fall into chaos but find steadiness, where you do not lose strength but feel more of it. I saw this in a woman named Laura. She worked in HR. She was attentive, caring, always offering help, remembering important dates, asking how everyone was doing. At first glance, she seemed like the ideal coworker. But over time, people started avoiding her. Not openly, not rudely. They just started having lunch without her more often, stopped inviting her to casual meetups, wrapped up hallway conversations more quickly. One day, I asked one of her coworkers why. She gave me a very precise answer. Laura is a good person, but every time I talk to her, I feel wrung out. She is always talking about problems. Hers, other people's, everybody's. Even when things are fine, she finds something to worry about. And I leave feeling like life is just one endless struggle with no air in it. That was the whole truth. Laura did not want to hurt anyone. She was not trying to drag people down. She honestly believed she was being empathetic, engaged, caring. But empathy is not just the ability to feel another person's pain. It is the ability to stay near that pain without losing your own center. And she did not have that center. Inside, there was not enough support. Her sense of worth was too fragile, so unconsciously she kept looking for proof of her value through other people's difficulties. People feel that very quickly. They can tell when you are beside them not because you can truly hold space for them, but because you are clinging to their pain, so you do not have to face your own emptiness. One day she was invited to an important meeting with a new executive. She wanted to be useful, so she tried to prepare him for everything. All the difficulties, all the internal tensions, all the rumors, all the risks. She thought she was helping him understand reality more quickly. He listened politely, thanked her, and after that, he almost never reached out to her directly again. Later, he said something to another employee that explained everything. She is probably a good person, but when I am around her, I cannot think about the future. She lives in a constant state of anxiety. That is what inner depletion sounds like when someone carries it into contact. You may not say anything overtly negative. You may even be polite and caring. But if there is no light in you, no inner order, people will feel that without mistake. Because life is simple in this way. We are drawn to the people around whom we become stronger, not the ones who talk the loudest about support. The ones whose presence itself feels like support. Can that change? Yes, but not through forced positivity, not through smiling on schedule, not through pretending to feel lighter than you really do. It only changes from the inside, when you stop living in constant deficiency, when you stop searching outside yourself for proof of your worth, when you stop using people as emotional crutches, then something else appears. Calm, balance, wholeness, and your presence stops draining people. It starts restoring them. People are drawn to that kind of person not out of pity, obligation, or politeness, but because near that person they feel, I can be myself here, I can breathe here, I can grow here. And respect is exactly that. Not when people choose you because they have to, but because they want to. Respect comes not to the one who talks the loudest, but to the one whose presence makes other people stronger, simply because he himself is no longer falling apart inside. Rule number 5. Respect dies the moment your words stop being a guarantee of your actions. A lot of people think saying it is enough. I will do it. I will take care of it. You can count on me. I have got it. It sounds convincing, especially when you say it with energy, with confidence, with a spark in your eyes. But if nothing follows those words except silence, a promise quickly turns into a debt, and debt turns into disappointment. And every time you fail to do what you said you would do, even if it is something small, even if everybody acts like it is not a big deal, another drop of trust quietly leaves you, not immediately, not loudly, but almost always permanently. Words without action are not just broken promises, they are a signal. My words do not carry much weight. And the moment people start picking that up, they stop taking you seriously. Not because they are angry, not because they want to punish you. Their mind simply learns. This person cannot be fully relied on. He will probably say yes, but that does not mean anything real will happen. And this touches every part of life. In friendship, people stop asking you for help because they know you will agree, then forget, delay, disappear, or find some explanation. At work, people stop trusting you with serious responsibility because they remember how often you postponed things, left them unfinished, or vanished at the worst moment. At home, people stop believing in your plans because too many of your soon, almost, and I definitely will, never became anything. And the most dangerous part is what this does inside you. Over time, you start believing you do not deserve to be taken seriously either, because when you keep breaking your own word, you are not only wearing down other people's trust, you are wearing down your own self-respect. A person does not always destroy himself through one great betrayal. Sometimes he does it through dozens of small ones. I will call tonight. And then he does not. I will send it tomorrow. And then he forgets again. I am starting Monday for real this time. And then nothing changes. On the surface, it all seems trivial. But that is exactly how your reputation is built, not the one you describe about yourself, the one people feel when they are around you, because respect is not built on intention. It is built on the alignment between word and deed. I saw this in a man named Ryan. He was charismatic, alive, full of ideas. He always had energy around him. He knew how to excite people, inspire them, pull them in. If you listened to him for 5 minutes, it felt like you were standing in front of someone who would have his own project, his own team, his own money, and a whole new life in a year. The problem was simple. Almost nothing he said ever made it into reality. He would start one thing, then jump to another, promise to call back, then disappear. Convince people to join an idea, then a week later be living inside some new vision entirely. And every time, it sounded convincing. Every time it felt like, okay, this time it is real. But nothing changed. One day, his friend Max put not only his time into one of Ryan's startup ideas, but also money. Not a huge amount, but enough to matter to him. Ryan swore everything was under control. Give me 1 month. The first money comes in and I will pay you back. With extra. A month passed. Nothing. Then another. Ryan started explaining. The market changed. My partner let me down. We just need a little more time. One more push and everything moves. Max stayed quiet for a while. Then he simply stopped answering Ryan's calls. A year later, Ryan was honestly confused. Why had people pulled away? Why was no one inviting him into serious projects anymore? Why did his ideas no longer generate the same excitement? Why did even warm acquaintances now listen to him with that polite, empty expression that says, I am hearing you, but I am not counting on any of this? He said, but I am an open person. I always meant well. I never tried to deceive anybody. And maybe that was true. Maybe he never set out to let anyone down. But trust does not care that much whether you failed someone intentionally or carelessly. If your words cannot be leaned on, they lose weight. And when your words lose weight, you lose weight with them. After a while, Max started working with someone else. A quiet man, almost invisible, did not speak beautifully, did not make big promises. He just said one day, I will have it ready by Friday. And he did, then again, and 6 months later, he was the one invited into a major project. Not because he was the brightest person in the room, not because he knew how to impress people with words, but because his word had become almost interchangeable with action. That is the paradox. The less you promise, the more people trust you, because people are tired of beautiful language with emptiness behind it. They are hungry for something quieter. for quiet reliability, the kind everything meaningful is built on: partnership, friendship, love, teams, respect. So stop saying, "I will do it," if you are not ready to do it. Say, "Let me think about that," or "I am not sure I can commit to that yet," or say nothing at all and simply do it. Because in a world where too many people talk loudly about their plans, the person who knows how to keep his word becomes rare, and rare things almost always command respect. Rule number 6. Respect does not live where the problem becomes more important than the solution. Complaining is human. When life gets hard, all of us want to talk, to let the pressure out, to feel supported, to feel that we are not alone. There is nothing shameful in that, but there is a fine line between honestly asking for help and turning your whole life into an endless monologue about injustice, failure, and why everything is so hard. Once complaining becomes a lifestyle, it stops being a signal of pain. It becomes a way of being. And in that state, a person is no longer looking for a way out. He is looking for confirmation that there is no way out. And that mindset destroys not only him, but the people around him too. Because constant complaining, even when disguised as realism or just telling it like it is, creates an atmosphere of hopelessness around you. People stop offering solutions because they already know you will reject them. They stop sharing good news with you because they know the answer will somehow circle back to your pain. And gradually they begin avoiding you, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. Because around you, it becomes hard to feel lightness, hard to feel momentum, hard to believe change is possible, and almost always, underneath that habit is one hidden belief: I do not deserve better. You do not believe you can change anything, so you surrender in advance. And instead of using your strength to look for a path, you spend it describing the dead end in greater and greater detail. You say, "My boss is an idiot," but you do not learn how to deal with him differently or look for another path. You say, "Life is unfair," but you do not ask where your leverage still exists. You say, "It is all pointless," without even checking if that is actually true. And over time, this stops being just a habit. It becomes your identity. You are no longer a person who has a problem. You become the problem. But people do not respect the one who suffers the loudest. They respect the one who keeps looking for a way forward anyway, even if the way is small, even if it is unclear, even if it barely exists yet. I saw this in a man named Jason. He worked in logistics. He had a family, and he complained constantly about money, about his boss, about traffic, about taxes, about the system, about how there is no real way to break through anymore. He could spend hours explaining how undervalued he was, how everything was stacked against him, how things used to be easier. At first, his friends sympathized with him. They gave advice. They suggested options. One said, "Change jobs." Another said, "Take a course." Another said, "Start looking before you hit the wall." Someone else suggested at least having a calm, honest conversation with management. But Jason always had a reason why it would not work. Too late. Too risky. That only works for other people. A year passed. His circle got smaller. People called less, invited him out less. And when I once asked one of his former friends what happened, he answered with painful precision, "You cannot talk to him about anything good anymore. He turns everything into a complaint. Even if you tell him you had a baby, he says something like, 'Well, congratulations, but now you are buried in expenses for years.'" It is exhausting. And not far from him lived another man, Victor. Similar job, similar pay, similar limits, even a similar kind of boss. But Victor almost never complained. He acted. At night, he worked on his English. He updated his resume. Every couple of months, he went to interviews even when he had no immediate plan to quit. Why? To understand the market. to keep his confidence sharp, to stay in motion. A year and a half later, he landed a role at an international company making almost 3 times as much. When Jason heard about it, he said, "Well, he just got lucky. Not everyone gets chances like that." But Victor was not waiting for a chance. He was getting ready for one, quietly, without noise, without drama. And that was the whole difference. Jason wanted the world to change for him. Victor changed himself, and because of that, his world started changing too. People do not respect the ones who speak the loudest about injustice. They respect the ones who know how to change the rules of their own life, even if they begin with one small detail. Because around that kind of person, hope appears, not decorative hope, not naive hope, hope with structure under it, hope backed by action. So stop pouring your energy into what is not working. Start investing it into what might work, even if right now it seems too small, too slow, or even a little ridiculous. Because respect does not come to the one who only describes the abyss. It comes to the one who starts building a bridge, even if all he has is what is lying around his feet. And the moment you replace the question, "Why is this happening to me?" with the question, "What can I do right now?" you stop being a victim of circumstances. You become the kind of person people respect not only because of success, but because he refuses to turn helplessness into an identity. Rule number 7, the final one. If you do not hold yourself by the hand, nobody else will hold you by the shoulder. Lack of self-respect is not really about not loving yourself. It is something else. It is the way you keep sending the same signal into the world over and over again. You can do this to me. You can interrupt me. You can ignore my boundaries. You can take my time without asking. You can use my kindness, my patience, my willingness to help, as if none of it carries a cost. You put your own needs at the very end of the list, after everyone else, even after the people who stopped valuing you a long time ago, and you do it not out of generosity, but out of something more dangerous, a deep, quiet belief that you are not entitled to better. That belief rarely appears in a single day. Sometimes it begins in childhood, when a person is taught that the most important thing is not to be difficult, not to be heavy, not to create problems, just to make life easier for everyone else. Sometimes it appears later, through betrayal, humiliation, constant comparison, and the kind of experiences that slowly train you to doubt your own worth. But wherever it started, the consequences always look similar. People, even when they do not wish you harm, adjust very quickly to the way you treat yourself. If you act as if your time is worth nothing, people will spend it freely. If you do not protect your own boundaries, people will keep stepping farther across them. If you do not value your own effort, eventually nobody else will notice it either. And the most painful part is that later, a person sincerely asks, "Why do people not respect me?" without noticing that every day, through his behavior, he keeps confirming the opposite. As if he is saying, "I do not need respect. It is enough if I am simply tolerated." You see this in ordinary life. You stay in relationships where you are not truly heard. You keep doing work where you are consistently undervalued. You stay quiet when someone humiliates you and calls it a joke. You apologize for normal needs. You agree to what feels wrong because you are afraid to lose someone's approval, and every one of those moments is more than a compromise. It is a vote against yourself. And respect from other people almost always begins with the way you treat yourself when nobody is clapping for you and nobody is strengthening you from the outside. You cannot force the world to see you as valuable while you are behaving like someone who can always be pushed to the edge without consequence. And this is not about pride, not about sharpness, not about performative confidence. Real self-respect is quieter than that. It sounds more like this: I will not let people treat me as if my presence means nothing. I do not have to apologize for having boundaries. I am not going to stay where I am not treated as an equal. I saw this in a woman named Claire. She worked as an accountant in a small company. Smart, reliable, collected. But her manager had gotten used to one thing. If he needed someone to stay late, Claire would stay. If something urgently had to be redone, Claire would take it. If someone was going to answer work calls on the weekend, it would be Claire. At first, it looked like trust, like she was indispensable, like everything depended on her. But over time, it became clear that this was not respect. It was exploitation wrapped in praise. You know how much everything depends on you? Claire almost never objected, not because she liked it, because she was afraid of looking difficult, afraid of being replaced, afraid of losing the little approval she got for always being available. She thought that was her value, to be useful, indispensable, always accessible. Then a new employee joined the department. Younger, less experienced, no special status, but she carried herself differently. One Saturday, the manager asked her to come in. She answered calmly, "I already have plans. If this really is urgent, let's think ahead next time about how to handle this during the work week." No attitude, no rudeness, no scene. And what happened? At first, he was surprised. Then he adjusted his tone. Then he almost stopped messaging her outside work hours entirely. Why? Because from the beginning, she showed him that her time had value, and you could not treat it carelessly. Claire, on the other hand, was still treated the old way, still overloaded, still expected to carry everything quietly, because she herself had confirmed it so many times. You can treat me like this. One day Claire asked me, why is it different with her, but still the same with me? And I said, because she showed that she respects herself, and you still do not. That sounded harsh, but it made her think. And a few months later, she started changing. First, in small things. She stopped answering work messages after 7 p.m. Then she stopped taking on extra work without discussion. Then she calmly asked to review her salary and her terms. Not with resentment, not with threats, with clarity. And do you know what happened? Her boss did not fire her. He offered her a promotion because for the first time, he saw not background, but a person. That is the point. Self-respect is not selfishness. It is the foundation. Without it, every attempt to earn respect from the outside is like building a house on sand. People can feel when you are not your own support, and then they do not always become cruel. More often, something quieter happens. They simply stop seeing you as an equal. So stop asking, why do people not respect me? Ask something more important. What am I doing today that confirms my own value? Because respect does not arrive from the outside. It rises outward from the way you treat yourself, from what you allow, from what you refuse, from what you take responsibility for, from what you no longer tolerate, from the way you hold yourself. And the moment you stop being last in your own life, the world stops placing you last too. Respect is not something handed to you. It is what remains behind you when you leave the room. It is not built on loud words. It cannot be bought. It does not need applause. It is born in quiet choices. When you keep your word, even if no one notices. When you say no, even if you are afraid of the consequences. When you can be happy for someone else's success without feeling threatened by it. When you take responsibility instead of searching for someone to blame. When you stop letting other people erase you into the background because you finally started respecting yourself. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about consistency. It is about becoming a little closer to yourself every day and a little farther from fear, from complaint, from helplessness, and from the role of a victim. And if even one of these reasons made you stop and think, then you are already on the way. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Start today. with one action, one honest no, one real step instead of 100 excuses. If this conversation spoke to you, leave a like, not for me, so words like these can reach the people who truly need them, and subscribe if you want more honest conversations like this. No performance, no empty promises, no motivational theater, just the truth life keeps proving again and again. And if you are ready, write one sentence in the comments. I am starting to change. Not for me, not for show. As a reminder to yourself, respect does not begin when the world changes. It begins when you stop waiting for permission to be worthy.